Up next, former Assistant Secretary of Defense Richard Perle joins us. But first, watch this.
Let's be clear about what this agreement does. It permits the assault on Aleppo to continue for another week. It requires opposition groups to stop fighting, but it allows Russia to continue bombing terrorists, which it insists is everyone, even civilians. This is diplomacy in the service of military aggression, and it's working because we are letting it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and joining us as promised, Richard Perle, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, former Chairman of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board, and former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Welcome back, sir.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I appreciate that. So, is John McCain correct in his assessment of the so-called truce in Syria?
Yes, I believe he is absolutely correct. And it's even a little worse because it will undoubtedly be violated, and because the Russians will continue to attack those opponents of the regime that we are inclined to support because they offer the best prospect for ending this conflict eventually without the worst characters coming to power and without Assad remaining.
Let me ask you this: with Turkey bombing the Kurds and Russia, as you alluded to, escalating, could this? How far could this escalate into a regional war?
Well, in a sense, it already is a regional war. You have, as you rightly observed, the Turks bombing the Kurds. We are supporting the Kurds because they're the only coherent force capable of dealing effectively with ISIS. You have the Russians bombing all over the place. You now have it's probably 4 or 5 million displaced homeless people and more every day flooding into Europe. It's a catastrophe, and it's the product of completely inept diplomacy going back now more than 3 years.
And
I should say inept policy, because it's not just diplomacy.
And maybe the most recent, or some of the most recent inept diplomacy and policy has to do with the Iran deal. And that, now that we've given them $120 billion, it seems that their whole stature has been escalated and upgraded and to some kind of regional superpower. What are they going to do with all that money?
Well, of course, you have to assume they will spend this windfall the same way they've been spending money when they were under severe financial constraints. And so that will mean a continuing flow of money to radical groups who are one of the main sources of instability in the region. They will continue to send money to Hezbollah. They will continue to send money to Hamas. They will continue to intervene wherever they can advance their purposes, which, because it is igniting and adding fuel to the flame of the Shia-Sunni competition, is a threat to the stability of the whole region.
And with the Saudis increasing oil production, and certainly not cutting oil production, that doesn't do much for Iran and Russia. In fact, it hurts Iran and Russia. How does that play into this whole thing?
Well, that's the only bright spot in the whole picture, is that both Russia and Iran and some other doubtful characters like the Venezuelans are adversely affected by these low energy prices. Without that, you would have even more money at the disposal of Mr. Putin and the Ayatollahs in Tehran. So we should be grateful for small things.
And because of their concerns over their economics, especially Russia, does that clamp down a little bit on what he might attempt to do militarily in that region?
I'm afraid that in Putin's case, as has often been the case with totalitarian dictators, he is more likely to be aggressive when he's having financial problems at home. And it's, among other things, a way of rallying people, taking their mind off the economic problems they're facing. So I expect he will behave even worse.
That's not good news. Okay, in Egypt, of course, you have Sisi, who's very anti-Muslim Brotherhood, and Obama continues to give this guy the cold shoulder. Is that to be expected? Are you surprised? And why is Obama doing this, in your view?
Well, I'm not surprised because it seems to me that Obama has made every conceivable mistake, and he's made most of them over and over again. We should be grateful for Sisi, who is a modernizer who's sympathetic to the United States and the West and is trying to deal with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a scourge throughout the world. But this administration seems to think that the Muslim Brotherhood is a potential ally of the United States. They haven't read the history, and they don't understand what they're doing.
Let me ask you about the race, Donald Trump. If he were to win the nomination on the Republican side, how would our allies react? Would this cause concern, do you believe?
I think they will, first of all, say, what's happened here? They're quite unaccustomed to anyone like Donald Trump, who's certainly not in the conventional mode. I think they'll be very apprehensive.
Yeah, okay.
But
yeah, go ahead.
It will reflect partly what Americans think and say.
Can he work with them, though? I mean, if he were to get the presidency, I mean, they'd be apprehensive, but I mean, it wouldn't affect directly any kind of relationship, would it, with the allies?
Of course, the allies have no choice but to work with whoever the American people in their wisdom choose to be their president. So, of course, they will work with Donald Trump.
And who in the GOP field do you see might be ready, in your view, to be commander-in-chief?
Well, I'm not enormously impressed with the field, and some of those who could be commander-in-chief have other issues. I think Ted Cruz could be a commander-in-chief, but I think there are other issues with Ted Cruz. I think Marco Rubio, who's young and lacks experience, which is unfortunate, nevertheless, in his public expression, seems to me quite thoughtful and intelligent.
Okay.
So, any of those.
So you'd have confidence in him. Richard Perle, thank you as always, sir. Appreciate it.
All the best.
Thank you. You too. The Malzberg panel is next, folks. Don't go away. Thank you.